So I haven't uploaded a HSC video in the past 2 weeks, and the reason for that is because I had no HSC exams. Between maths and today, there was nothing. But just over 3 hours ago at this rate, I've just completed the Geography HSC 2025 edition. Now this year is special because they introduced a new syllabus last year, so we are the first year to ever do the brand new Geography syllabus. Now that's a little bit of a mixed bag. You are learning new content after all and stuff that no one else has done. However, the problem is there are no past papers to compare to, You can't do any past papers to practice. You can't really look at anything from the past because all of it would be outdated. So we can only rely on the trial papers. And honestly, the HSC exam is quite different from the trials. The type of questions they did and honestly the general layout of the entire exam is actually quite different. So you still get the 4 sections in the trials. You get the multiple choice, which are skill based. You have to look at a map and look at a photograph and answer questions based on that. But that's simple enough. 15 questions on multiple choice. Section 2 is the short answer. For some random reason, the short answer is half the HSC itself. It's 45 marks. So yeah, that's where all the marks come from, I guess. Section 3 is a structured essay worth 20 marks. And Section 4 is an unstructured long essay, also worth 20 marks. Now, that aside, though, overall, the paper was not that hard. It was okay. There were some questions that were a little bit more tricky than the others. I felt like the short answer were quite tricky in a way where all the questions were quite long. They were all 5 or 6 mark questions, or maybe a 4 mark question here or there. But they weren't any simple 2 or 3 mark questions like describe the place or outline the place you've studied. Nah, none of that at all. They don't reserve any marks for that. Instead, they only reserve the marks for 5 mark questions, which were quite a lot, You have to write quite a decent amount to get 5 marks, really. But that aside, though, the short answer were quite simple enough. Personally, for me, the hardest part of that paper was Section 4, the unstructured long essay. The question they provided for that was actually not the easiest in the world. It was the most broadest question ever, which, let me get on my phone because I forgot it by now. But that question was, explain the nature and complexities of ecosystems. Now, you might think that's easy enough. It's quite, broad, it's quite general. But then actually trying to answer it, you start to realize, what the hell am I supposed to talk about? The nature and complexities of ecosystems. So what I did for this question, I spent like maybe 2 minutes thinking and realizing that, yeah, this question is a bunch of baloney and I hate it. But that aside, I structured my essay to be 2 very long body paragraphs. And what I mean by very long is I talked about the 2 different ecosystems we studied during that course. Now, the 2 ecosystems we studied was the Fiordland National Parks in New Zealand and the Great Barrier Reef here in Australia. I basically talked about how different species of stuff within these ecosystems, such as the coral in Great Barrier Reef and the biomes and crap in the Fiordlands National Park, how each of these species require interconnected relationships with other species for them to survive. Such as coral, for example, requiring a tropical heat. You got 15 to 25 degrees Celsius water. You need the right salinity, the right turbidity, the right sunlight, and the right water depth in order for the coral to survive. So you could say that the interrelationships between all these different requirements for coral to live is an example of the different nature and complexities behind ecosystems. So it's quite a broad question, very general and not very specific in a way where I thought it'd be like judging something, like evaluate the strategies behind sustainability in an ecosystem. But they did not do that at all, which I'm quite surprised by. Personally, I didn't like the question based on how broad it is because it's quite hard to actually, talk about everything there is in ecosystems because there's a million things you can talk about at the end of the day. You can talk about the 50,000 species in Great Barrier Reef. You could talk about the relationships. You could talk about the water itself. You could talk about human-induced modifications, which I did slightly in my essay. I don't know if it was needed, but I talked about how climate change was impacting the Great Barrier Reef, for example, which therefore demonstrates the complexities behind ecosystems. But for it to be so broad and so open-ended makes it quite hard to answer it in general, actually. So I didn't really like the question at all. But that aside, I should talk about the other stuff. For our rural and urban places, we have to talk about settlement slash area located within a larger urban area. For us, we did Green Square, which is lucky for me because I actually live quite close to Green Square. So I know about the area quite a lot. Talked about the, if I remember the question off the top of my head, which I probably don't. We had to talk about the. Okay, I forgot. Okay, whatever. For the next one, we have to talk about a rural place, which for us, we did Tamworth, a small rural town in New South Wales. I talked about the country music festival, how it is an important link to the surrounding area, because our question was discuss your rural place, aka Tamworth, and how it links up with other surrounding areas. So talk about the country music festival, how people are brought in into Tamworth because of a festival, socially, culturally, blah blah blah. And economically as well, Tamworth is quite linked to surrounding towns because it acts as a hub for economic trade because there's a trade station, you export, import goods through Tamworth, and yeah, it just acts as an economic hub for surrounding towns. So that was the links with Tamworth. And for our large urban conglomeration outside of Australia, we did Hong Kong, which is very interesting because most people do New York, but our teachers decided, yeah, let's do Hong Kong. So we did Hong Kong. And the questions which were in the unstructured essay, the structured essay, meant section 3, we have to talk about Hong Kong and how there were challenges in Hong Kong and how you had to evaluate 2 strategies within Hong Kong to increase the people's quality of life. Honestly, not the hardest section 3 ever. They were quite simple and quite predictable questions. You just talk about challenges and strategies to solve the challenges. So it's quite straightforward. But that aside, honestly, the paper in itself wasn't the hardest. The first section was also not the hardest in the world. The skills, they didn't take that long, actually. I was quite surprised because normally skills would take a while, which is why I'd skip over them because 15 marks, I don't really care about it. You can just... It's multiple choice, you can just guess them really, but they weren't the hardest in the world. And personally for me, this paper was a mixed bag. New syllabus, new everything, so nothing could have been expected. But that aside, yeah, that's geography done. And that is the last HSC paper I will ever do in my life. That's a crazy thought, that is a crazy thought. But yeah, that is the last HSC I will ever do in my life. So no more of these videos, I guess. I guess I'll have to make one more video, which is me getting the results, which I'm not looking forward to making, but we'll see. That's a hurdle that will come in a month and 15 days, so you guys gotta wait a month and 15 days for me to make that video. But that aside, that's all I have for today's video. Thank you guys for watching. It's been a cool journey going through the HSC, you know. It is the end of schooling for me. As I enter university, hopefully. I don't know what the future holds, but at the end of the day, who gives a shit? Yeah, your ATAR is not your whole life. I guess maybe that's the most important thing to say. Or maybe it is important. I'm not too sure.